today's session, we are going to discuss the topic A Spark Neglected Burns the House, written by Leo Tolstoy. Here, the spark was also a symbol of a small quarrel which grew into hate filled feud which destroyed lives. First of all, I would like to tell something about the author Leo Tolstoy. He was born in 1828. He was a Russian writer, considered to be one of the greatest writers of time. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize multiple times. He wrote short stories, children's books, and books for young adults, usually upholding moral life lessons. His novels War and Peace and Anna Karenina have been read and loved by people all over the world. There once lived in a village peasant named Ivan. He had a wife and three sons. Peasant means farmer. The eldest was married, and second about to marry, and third was a big lad who could mind the horses by himself. Ivan took care of his old father, had been lying ill on the top of the brick oven for 7 years. Here, oven means the Russian oven or stove is a type of brick stove, usually built in the middle of a log cottage. It was used to both for cooking as well as heating up the room. In the severe Russian winters, it was quite common for people to sleep on the top of the oven to keep warm. Ivan had all he needed, like three horses and a colt, a cow with a calf, and 15 sheep. The woman made all the clothing for the family, besides helping in the fields, and the man tilled the land. Actually, Ivan family had a good terms with the neighbors. They trusted and helped each other. They never quarreled with the other. Little things, if anyone needed anything, the other would gladly lend it. And if a cow happened to enter into the neighbor's yard, they just drove it out, and never thought of quarreling about anything. But later days, it was changed. The family of Ivan generally harmonious. Small matters started. All all the trouble was started. Ivan's daughter-in-law had a hen that used to lay its eggs in the cot set. One day, probably frightened by the children, it flew over the fence into the neighbor's yard and laid its eggs there. Ivan's daughter-in-law looked for the egg in the car shed as usual. Tara means her brother-in-law. He said, "Your hen flew over the fence and laid an egg in the neighbor's yard. Then it flew back across the fence again." So Ivan's daughter-in-law went to Gabriel's house. So the Ivan's daughter-in-law went to the Gabriel house. The young woman inquired about the eggs, but the granny reply was not very polite, and he replied very rudely, and the young woman offended and said more than should have done. Granny answered back, and soon the women were shouting and abusing each other like, "You are a thief, you are a dirty woman, you are starving," like that. A huge uproar ensues that embroils every member of each family. Against the advice of the family elders to seek quick reconciliation, the families bring cases against each other in court, and they blame each other for every little mishap that happens to befall them. Every accusation makes the enmity grow. The children learn from the example of their parents, and the feud goes on for 6 years. Elders urge for the families to forget their differences. But the feud continues, which means quarrel. A drunken Gabriel strikes one of Ivan's daughter-in-laws, and Ivan eventually sees to it that he is sentenced to flogging. Gabriel is shocked, and he curses his neighbor. The magistrate argues the two to reconcile, but Gabriel refuses. eventually begins to feel sorry for Gabriel, but he refuses to see his own wrongdoing in the quarrel. Ivan's father argues him to reconcile and to stop wasting his time and money going to court, and to stop setting a bad example for his family. Ivan still refuses to reconcile. Eventually, Gabriel sets Ivan's house on fire. No neighbors will help Ivan save his belongings, and eventually the fire overtakes Gabriel's house as well. Ivan's father is burned in the fire, and on his deathbed, Ivan's father asks his son whose fault the fire was. Ivan finally realizes that it was his fault and asks forgiveness from his father and from God. His father adjusts Ivan never to tell that it was Gabriel that had set the fire, and Ivan agrees. After that, Ivan and Gabriel again become good friends, and their families live together as their houses were rebuilt. The families then go on to become more prosperous than ever, all over following the elders' advice to quench their spark before it becomes a fire. Theme of the lesson is don't forgive your enemies for their sake. Do it for your sake. Forgive your enemies.